Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into something today that has some serious global implications. Basically, Brazil and Mexico are pushing for this new trade agreement, and it's not just like a minor thing, you know? This has the
Mm.
potential to really shake up, well, how things work in Latin America. We're talking like it completely reshape the economics. So I've pulled together a ton of articles on this, different analyses, even some speculation about how this could impact global, like global alliances and stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating to see all this unfold. And yeah, like everyone always talks about Mexico looking north, right? But Lula's making like a serious play to kind of flip that whole narrative on its head.
Yeah, for sure. Look south, he says. And you know what? He's got a point. Like some of these reports, they're suggesting that if you could fully integrate Brazil and Mexico's economies,
Right.
their combined GDP could actually rival Germany's. That's a big deal.
It's huge.
But what's the driving force here? Like what are they hoping to actually achieve with this new agreement?
I think it boils down to modernization, really,
Mm.
maximizing their potential, right? Like
Mm.
they've had this economic complementation agreement. It's from 2002,
Okay.
but it's pretty outdated. It doesn't cover all these new industries where, they see the real opportunities, the big growth potential.
Yeah.
We're talking about things like automotive manufacturing, aerospace, even electric vehicles, renewable energy, all the sectors that are, kind of poised to just explode in the coming years.
It's like they're really trying to set the stage to be major players in these industries of the future.
Exactly.
And I mean, given all the uncertainty around the USMCA, it makes sense, right? I mean, Mexico's got to be looking for ways to diversify, strengthen its position globally.
Absolutely. And I think, especially after the past few years, with the whole tariff man era and everything,
Oh, yeah.
it really highlighted how risky it can be to rely too heavily on just one trade partner. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. And like those tariffs weren't just empty threats either.
Oh,
Remember when Trump actually slapped those tariffs on steel and aluminum?
oh yeah,
Like that sent shockwaves through the entire global market.
absolutely.
I mean, did it even work? I remember some economists were saying that it actually ended up hurting like American consumers more than anyone else.
Exactly. And I think even though there's a new administration in the U.S. now, that uncertainty still lingers.
Right.
So in a way, Mexico's sending a message with this. It's like they're not going to just wait around and see what happens. They're taking control.
Yeah. Taking their destiny into their own hands.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got them looking south, aiming to become this major economic force and maybe even challenging the old guard, right? The US, the EU.
Right.
But let's back up a bit here. What's the foundation of this Brazil-Mexico relationship? I mean, it's not like they just suddenly decided to be best buds.
Not at all. This has been, kind of brewing for a while now. Remember, like back in 2022, they had that bilateral consultation mechanism meeting,
Okay.
and they were already finding common ground on issues like climate change, human rights.
Yeah.
They were already kind of on the same page about a lot of things.
Right, right. And weren't they also working together on like tackling that whole illegal arms trafficking thing too?
Exactly. You got it. So this new trade agreement, it's not coming out of nowhere. It's built on years of, growing collaboration and partnership.
They've like laid the groundwork.
Exactly. And now they're ready to take it to the next level.
Okay, so we've got history here. We've got a shared vision. There's definitely a sense of urgency. This isn't just two countries shaking hands. We're potentially talking about shifting the balance of power here in the Americas and maybe even globally. But before we, get ahead of ourselves, let's break down exactly what this new agreement could actually mean. What are the specifics?
Okay, so we need to look at which industries stand to benefit the most. How will this impact nearshoring? And then there's the whole question of Mexico potentially joining BRICS.
Whoa, whoa, hold on, BRICS. Okay, now that's getting really interesting. You're talking about Mexico potentially joining forces with let me get this straight. It's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
That's right.
That would be huge.
It would send a very clear message to the rest of the world, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it would suggest that Mexico is ready and willing to explore these new alliances, even if it ruffles some feathers along the way.
Absolutely.
Okay, we are definitely going to unpack this whole BRICS situation in a bit. But first, let's dive into the potential impact of this trade agreement on some specific sectors. Because at the end of the day, this is about creating real opportunities for businesses and for people on the ground. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with the automotive industry. So the automotive industry,
Mm.
both Brazil and Mexico, they've got these, pretty strong manufacturing bases already.
Right.
But think about it. If they work together, they could achieve even greater economies of scale.
Yeah, makes sense.
right? So you can see things like joint ventures popping up, more knowledge sharing, a more integrated supply chain,
Oh, absolutely.
which, by the way, could also be good news for consumers.
How so?
Well, think about it. More competition often means better prices.
Right, right.
And who knows, maybe we'll see some exciting new models hit the market too with this kind of collaboration.
Yeah, that would be cool. And it's not just about traditional cars either, right? I mean, the whole world is moving towards electric vehicles.
Exactly.
And both Brazil and Mexico have been, kind of dipping their toes in that water.
For sure. And this agreement, I think, could really accelerate that transition.
Yeah.
Imagine, like, they go beyond just assembling EVs,
Right?
right? What if they start collaborating on the research and development, the battery technology, even like charging infrastructure? They could become major players in that global EV market.
That's a really good point. Okay, so automotive, clear winner there. But what about other industries? I know from the stuff that you shared, aerospace and renewable energy are also pretty high on the agenda.
Yeah, for sure. So Brazil, they've got Embraer, right?
Yeah.
Global powerhouse in aerospace.
Huge company.
Yeah, and Mexico, they've got this growing cluster of aerospace companies too, particularly in manufacturing, I think.
Okay.
So collaboration there could be huge. We could see joint ventures to, develop new aircraft,
Yeah.
sharing expertise, like in things like avionics and composites. They might even explore opportunities in, well, everyone's talking about it,
Yeah.
the space sector.
Yeah, the final frontier, right. Talk about reaching for the stars with that one. What about renewable energy, though? I know both countries have made commitments to transition to cleaner energy, but how does that all fit in?
Well, it's interesting, right? Brazil, they're basically a powerhouse when it comes to hydroelectric power, biofuels.
Right,
Mexico, on the other hand, they've got this huge potential in solar and wind.
right.
So they could actually leverage each other's strengths here,
I see.
create this much more robust and interconnected energy grid, and maybe even start exporting renewable energy to neighboring countries.
Whoa. Okay, now that would be a game changer. I mean, it sounds like this agreement could be a win-win, right, for
Yeah.
both countries, economically and environmentally. But what about the social impact here?
Well, that's a good question.
I mean, are we just talking about benefits for big corporations, or will this actually trickle down to, everyday people?
Right, right. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, ideally, you want a successful agreement to translate into actual job creation,
Yeah.
and not just in, manufacturing, but also related sectors. Think logistics, services, research and development, all of that. But got to be realistic. Both countries are going to have to invest heavily in things like education and skills training.
To make sure people are prepared.
Exactly. You need a workforce that's actually equipped to handle the demands of these new industries.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yeah, you can't just assume those benefits are going to magically trickle down. You've got to be proactive. You've got to make an effort to make sure everyone benefits, has the opportunity to participate. And speaking of opportunity, I feel like we haven't even touched on this whole nearshoring thing yet.
Ah, right. Nearshoring. This is where things get really, really interesting, especially for Mexico.
Oh, okay.
So we've got rising labor costs in China.
Right.
There's growing concerns about supply chain disruptions. Companies are, well, kind of freaking out a little and looking to move their manufacturing closer to their customers, closer to North America.
Makes sense. It's about time.
Right. And Mexico, well, they're in a prime position here. They've got that proximity to the U.S. market.
Huge advantage.
And they've already got a pretty solid manufacturing infrastructure in place. They're ready to capitalize on this trend.
It's like all the stars are aligning.
Exactly. And that's where this new trade agreement comes in. It's not just strengthening those ties with Brazil. It's enhancing Mexico's attractiveness to foreign investors. Companies looking at North America are going to be even more likely to choose Mexico if it means access to, this larger, more integrated market that includes Brazil.
Right, it's like a double whammy, right. They benefit from nearshoring from North America and increased trade with South America. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. But let's be real for a second. It's not all going to be smooth sailing, right? What are some of the challenges they're going to have to overcome to actually make this work?
Well, infrastructure is a big one. For Mexico especially. They're going to need to invest like a lot of money in their roads, railways, ports. All that stuff needs to be upgraded to handle the increased flow of goods between the two countries.
Right, it's like building a house. You can have the best design, the best materials, but if you don't have a solid foundation,
it's all going to crumble. They're also going to need to look at regulatory hurdles. Streamlining customs procedures, harmonizing standards, creating this stable and predictable business environment, that's crucial if you want to attract and keep foreign investment.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about the political side of things. I mean, we've talked about the uncertainty around USMCA, but there's, internal politics within Brazil and Mexico that could throw a wrench in the works too, right?
Oh, for sure. Any new trade agreement, you're going to have some tough negotiations.
Yeah.
Compromises on both sides. And with elections coming up in both countries, maintaining that political will, the momentum to see this through, that's going to be a challenge.
Okay, so definitely some hurdles to overcome. But even with all of that, there's this real sense of momentum behind this initiative. It's exciting.
Yep.
And then, well, there's the elephant in the room. Or should I say the bear in the room?
Yes.
Mm,
BRICS. We can't ignore the elephant or the bear, as you cleverly put it.
right. I mean, the fact that Mexico is even considering joining this group of emerging economies speaks volumes, I think. It's a bold move, right? I mean, BRICS has been pretty vocal about challenging the existing global order, particularly the dominance of the US dollar. What would it mean for Mexico to align itself with a group that's openly pushing for an alternative economic system?
Well, it would certainly make some people in Washington nervous, that's for sure. But, we have to remember BRICS isn't just about, sticking to the West.
Okay.
It's really about creating a more multipolar world, right?
Yeah.
One where those emerging economies have a bigger say in how things are run.
That makes sense. I mean, for a long time, these global institutions, they've been dominated by, well, a handful of wealthy nations.
Okay.
Well, maybe it is time for a shakeup. But wouldn't joining BRICS, kind of put Mexico at odds with the U.S.? I mean, everyone's talking about this new Cold War brewing between the U.S. and China.
Yeah, it's a delicate dance, for sure.
Yeah.
But Mexico, they've always been pretty good at, navigating those complex geopolitical situations.
Yeah, they have.
They've got this long history of keeping those close ties with the U.S. while, still looking out for their own interests.
That's true. And I mean, let's be honest, the world's a pretty unpredictable place these days. It's getting more and more volatile. It kind of makes sense for countries to, diversify their alliances a bit. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
Exactly. And for Mexico especially, I mean, they've often been caught in the middle of, U.S. foreign policy.
Hmm.
So strengthening their ties with other players on the global stage,
Right.
BRICS nations, for example, it could be really, really important for them strategically.
Okay, so we've got this potential trade agreement with Brazil. We've got this whole nearshoring boom happening. And then on top of all of that, the possibility of Mexico joining BRICS.
Yeah.
It really feels like we're watching the global power dynamics shift in real time.
It's exciting, isn't it?
It is. So what does it all mean?
I think it means the world is changing. Like a lot of the old assumptions, they just don't apply anymore. We're in this new era where regional blocs, emerging economies, they're the ones that are going to play an increasingly important role.
So what's your prediction? Is this new trade agreement, Brazil, Mexico, is it actually going to happen? And if it does, will it live up to the hype?
Well, anyone who says they can predict the future is, well, they're probably lying to you.
Right.
But I will say this, both countries, they've got a strong incentive to make this work.
I mean, that's true.
They're dealing with very similar challenges. They both want to, kind of level up their global standing. If they can figure out a way to get over those hurdles, right, the ones we talked about, and if they can maintain that political will, this agreement could be huge, not just for those two countries, but for the entire region.
It's a bold vision. It's going to be amazing to see how it all unfolds. But before we wrap up today, I want to bring it back to our listeners for a second. Why should they care about this? A trade agreement between two countries thousands of miles away. What's the big deal?
That's a fair point. But, we live in a very interconnected world now. What happens on one side of the planet, it has ripple effects everywhere. This agreement, it could change global trade patterns. It could influence investment decisions. It could even impact the price of, well, the stuff we buy every day right here at home.
That's a good point. It's like we're not just citizens of our own countries anymore.
Right.
We're citizens of the world.
Absolutely.
And the decisions these countries make today, they're going to shape the world of tomorrow for all of us.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to stay informed, right? To actually engage in these conversations, these big picture discussions, challenge our own assumptions about how the world works. That's how we make sure we're ready for whatever comes next.
Well said. Couldn't agree more. So to our listeners, we'll leave you with this. Keep your eyes on Brazil and Mexico. The story, it's just getting started, and it promises to be a wild ride. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and as always, keep diving deep.